In my work email, they somehow find out who my boss is, and then they spoof the email to make it look like it's from my boss. It's not as amateur as before.
It's not a Nigerian prince anymore, so.
Yeah, it's not Nigerian prince anymore. Yeah, that's right. Aside from these collaboration tools, with the remote work now, we've moved from that secure location in the office, and now we're using our residential connection to connect to the databases that we need to connect with, to the systems that we need to connect with. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the security in the office versus the situation that we find ourselves now?
Sure. So before the whole lockdown situation, when people worked from the office, the way you look at security was everyone was on the inside and you are trying to prevent unauthorized access that is coming from the outside. And most of the time, you made these assumptions that people who are inside were trusted actors, right? So you gave them all the access and everything to do their jobs, to look at data and things like that. But now the offices are all closed. So everyone is on the outside trying to get access information that is sitting in on-premises or internal networks. So it's a different paradigm shift, right? You have to look at security in a different way. That means like you cannot trust anyone, right? So that's a huge challenge, especially for small organizations. Bigger organizations, they're already set up for remote work. They're already set up for, they're probably like very mature into public cloud, things like that. But for smaller organizations who have very little IT budget, it's a big shift.
So like if I think about this as like the company trying to protect a house, traditionally, if I'm going into the office, well, the company's already given me the keys, they've given me the laptop. If I'm able to open the front door and get into the office and be physically working from the office, well then they trust me to go around the house and just do what I need to do. But now we have to connect from the outside. We have to come in from the outside and get access to the data inside. So part of that is actually having a secure way to connect to the systems and the data that's in the company's data center. That's number one. And then number two is even when I'm in, the control of which systems I can access, which data I can access, that's also a challenge, right? Like identity and access management.
So on the identity and access management, before, in the context of smaller organization, they wouldn't have needed like granular permissions, right? Most people would have been given full read-write access across the board. Now, because everyone is outside, that's a huge security risk, right? So if they haven't properly set up their password, or if they are trying to access from their personal device and that device is compromised, then that opens up a lot of possibilities for options for bad actors, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting because to your point, like I just wanted to zoom in on kind of zoom in on the personal devices for a sec. We're talking about people now accessing the files on their phones, on their iPads, on their own laptops, on their own computers. That's very different from actually using a desktop that your company provides, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So your company laptops usually have some kind of antivirus. There are security policies put in place. They're super hardened from the operating system level. There are multiple layers of protection, sometimes at the hardware level. But your personal laptop or even your phones don't have that kind of a security put in place, right? There are things you can do, but most of the time, a lot of organizations don't have that. Now, because you are trying to access information from an unsecure source, then that's another security vulnerability.
Yeah, and even if I'm thinking about like the laptops and the computers that I've used at work, I'm not able to install anything unless it's already in the catalog of pre-approved applications. So the company would certify a certain application is safe for me to use, and then I'm able to choose it. But now, again, to your point, I'm able to install anything on my own laptop. I could be installing malware. I could be installing viruses that allow someone else to kind of control my computer that then would be able to connect to the data sources for my company, right?
Yep.
Another thing is, I guess, as we think through this, not everything is on a centralized system. Not all important data is on a centralized system. Sometimes there's companies that don't have IT budget for a certain year, or to your point, small and medium-sized businesses that don't have IT teams to build these systems. They build, these shadow IT applications, right? Like an application that's built on Excel or built on MS Access and using VBA or whatever. And the sensitive data is stored on this. Now, again, when we're in the company's network, if the perimeter is secure, then you should be okay. But now, again, I might be downloading these files onto my computer.
Exactly. So if you have a macro application accessing some sensitive data and you are using it from your personal device and your personal device is compromised, now you have a direct line into your company's most critical data, right?
Mm-hmm. So what other security considerations do we have when we're thinking about working remotely?
The other one we briefly talked about is some of those unauthorized channels, right? Like maybe using Dropbox that is not properly password protected. Password 123 is not really a password, right?
Yeah.
We earlier talked about Zoom, which is now this has some serious security considerations. Mm-hmm. So uncontrolled channels, and then the other thing that we are not really realizing is when you're working in the office and you get some kind of a phishing email, right? Like you get an email from your boss, hey, I'm stuck in the airport. I need like $100 Tim Hortons card. Can you send it to me? You can look around, ask your colleague and ask like, oh, what is going on? And then you can call that bullshit right away, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're working from home, you're all by yourself. Now that human firewall is missing. Now you are more susceptible to those phishing attacks.
Now they're getting a lot more sophisticated because in my work email, they're actually sending me emails about, like you said, from my boss. They somehow find out who my boss is, and then they spoof the email to make it look like it's from my boss. And then it's not as amateur as before when you used to see a lot of spelling errors. Now they're doing it pretty professionally.
Yeah. It's not a Nigerian prince anymore. So
yeah, it's not Nigerian prince anymore. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, like I mean, I've seen that, and it sometimes it does give you pause, and when you're already kind of hyper vigilant about everything that's going on around you, so in the greater context of things, we're doing remote work because of the pandemic, because of the virus that's going around. So when we're going grocery shopping, we're already being vigilant about the hygiene around us, right? Not being too close to someone else, making sure that we always cough or sneeze in our sleeves, and then making sure that even sanitizing your groceries when you bring it home. And now you're already mentally, physically exhausted from being so careful about kind of the COVID virus, and now you're coming home, and now all these, the digital threats, the digital security threats, you have to be vigilant as well. It's just mentally and physically exhausting.
Yeah. And the other thing that we are seeing happening more and more is people want to know what's going on with the pandemic situation, right?
Yeah,
how many cases are rising, how many death toll. So people trying to look for information. So what these bad actors are doing is like they create all these fake heat maps and hide malwares, viruses underneath it. So when you click on a heat map to see that, maybe there's a link to see like what's look at the number of cases in your area. You click on that. That means a virus is going to get downloaded in your device. That can be either a ransomware, or it might be getting your own personal details for some other identity theft or something like that.
That ties into kind of everything that we talked about, right? Once you kind of have 1 weak link in the chain, and someone's able to get access to your machine, you're being trusted to go into to connect with the company's systems and the company's data, and once any part of it is vulnerable and has been exploited, then you can lose all the data, right? If they can have access to all the data that's in your company. Something else that we've been hearing is kind of possibly like state actors that are hacking websites. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is not something new, right? They've been already doing that, like DDoS attacks on government infrastructure to bring them down. But now it's like the reports are it's getting even more serious. WHO's website has been attacked multiple times, right? And there are also state-sponsored trolls on social media spreading disinformation about COVID-19, or saying that it's some kind of a government propaganda, different things you can imagine, right? So that's been getting more and more serious because state-sponsored agencies have taken a big interest in these areas as well.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of also exposes you to vulnerabilities from other security considerations as well, right? Like you said, when you get this information that's targeted towards you, and you're interested in that kind of information, you tend to start clicking, and then we know that there are state-sponsored hackers who try to install malware on people's computers. So that's a big issue as well.